David did not lower the axe after the new frozen disappeared. He remained near the window, shoulders squared, one hand locked around the worn wooden handle while the other rested close to the pistol holstered at his hip. Outside, the thing's distorted shriek faded between the houses, swallowed by distance and the growing wind. Another cry answered from farther away. Then another. Not the same sound. The first was high and jagged, almost human until it broke apart. The second came lower, carrying a harsh vibration that Marcus felt through the window more than heard. The neighborhood answered in fragments. A car horn blared somewhere beyond the next block. Glass shattered. Someone shouted 3 words Marcus could not understand. A gun fired once. Then twice. Then silence returned so suddenly that the house seemed to hold its breath. David stepped away from the window. "We're leaving." Margaret looked at him. "Now. As soon as the van is ready." She glanced toward the pale street beyond the curtains. "You said we should wait until we understood what was happening." "I said we shouldn't run blind." David looked toward the window again. "We're not blind anymore." Marcus followed his gaze. Snow had started gathering along the curb. Not much. A thin white line over green grass, damp pavement, and fallen summer leaves. It had been August when they woke up. It did not feel like August anymore. David continued. "We know the cold is getting worse. We know those things are moving through the neighborhood. We know there's more than one kind, and the new one is faster." "And stronger," Marcus said. David nodded once. "And stronger." He adjusted his grip on the axe. The weapon had belonged in the garage that morning. It had been a tool then, kept sharp because David believed dull tools were more dangerous than sharp ones. Now he carried it everywhere. The pistol remained secured in the leather holster at his waist. David had not drawn it since taking it from the bedroom safe. He had checked it, loaded it, and explained to Marcus and Margaret that gunshots would carry farther than any scream they could make. The axe was quiet. The gun was not. "We have a solid house," Margaret said carefully. "Food, water, heat for now." "And windows," David said. "Doors, walls that don't move when the danger moves." His voice remained calm, but Marcus knew him well enough to hear what sat beneath it. The house had stopped being a shelter in David's mind. It had become a position. Positions could be surrounded. David walked into the kitchen and set the axe against the edge of the table without letting go of it. The blade rested on the floor beside his boot. "We take the van before the roads get worse," he said. "We choose a route with room to change direction. We move slowly. We don't stop unless stopping is safer than moving." Margaret joined him at the table. Marcus remained near the living room entrance for another moment, listening to the neighborhood. Nothing screamed. Nothing struck the house. He followed his parents into the kitchen. David pulled the yellow legal pad toward him and opened the map on his phone. The cellular signal had weakened since breakfast. Pages loaded slowly, and several emergency alerts sat across the top of the screen, repeating instructions that no longer sounded connected to the world outside. Remain indoors. Avoid travel. Wait for official guidance. Emergency services are responding. Marcus stared at the last sentence. He had heard sirens earlier. He had not heard one in a long time. David enlarged the map until their neighborhood filled the screen. "We need the best way out," he said. Marcus reached for a pen, then stopped. There was something he needed to tell them. The thought had been waiting inside him since breakfast, becoming heavier every time something impossible proved that the first impossible thing might not have been a dream. "Before we do that," Marcus said, "there's something that happened this morning." Both parents looked at him. He hesitated, not because he feared they would dismiss him, but because saying it aloud gave the memory weight. "When I woke up, there was a screen floating in front of my face." David's expression did not change. Margaret leaned slightly closer. "A screen. Blue, transparent, like light hanging in the air." Marcus raised one hand, holding it approximately 1.5 feet from his face. It was right here. What did it say? David asked. Marcus remembered every word. Compatible Haven candidate detected. Margaret repeated the phrase quietly. Haven candidate. There were 2 more lines, Marcus said. Awaiting compatible Haven, initialization pending. The kitchen remained quiet. David's hand stayed around the axe handle. Were you awake? He asked. I thought I was. I could see the room. I checked my phone afterward. It was a little after 6. Did it move? No. Make any sound? No. Did it respond when you spoke? I didn't really say much. Margaret gave him a faint look. Marcus shrugged. I said nope. Under any other circumstances, she might have smiled. Her attention remained on the memory. What happened to it? She asked. I touched it. David's eyes sharpened. With your hand. My fingers went through it. It felt cold. Then the screen disappeared. Did anything happen after that? No. No pain, dizziness, anything different. Marcus shook his head. Nothing I noticed. David glanced at Margaret. She was thinking about the words. Marcus could see it in the way her eyes narrowed slightly, as if the answer might appear if she arranged them correctly. Compatible, she said. That means something was checking whether you matched whatever it needed. Candidate means I wasn't the only possible choice, Marcus said. Maybe, David replied, or it means you hadn't finished whatever the process was. Marcus looked between them. Did either of you see anything? No, Margaret said. David shook his head. Has it come back? He asked. Not once. Nothing else appeared when we saw the tears in the sky. Nothing when those things showed up. No. David considered that. This morning, I would have called it a dream, he said. Now I'm not calling anything impossible until it proves itself. Margaret looked at Marcus. Haven usually means a safe place. Or shelter, Marcus said. Awaiting compatible haven, she repeated. Maybe it was looking for somewhere. Or something, David said. He picked up the phone again. We don't know enough to do anything with it. If it returns, read everything before you touch it. Marcus nodded. And tell us immediately, Margaret added. I will. David tapped the legal pad with one finger. Now we find a way out. Margaret took the phone from him. Not the main entrance. David looked at her. Why? Because everyone will use it. She enlarged the map, then dragged it toward the northern side of the neighborhood. The main road looks wide here, but it narrows near the stone sign. There's a median, and people park along both sides after the bend. If 2 cars crash there, nobody gets around them. You've run it recently, David asked. Yesterday morning. Yesterday. The word landed strangely. Yesterday, Margaret had run through a warm summer neighborhood while people watered lawns and backed out of driveways on their way to work. Yesterday, none of this had existed. Or none of them had known it existed. Margaret traced another street. This route is wider, but the hill is steeper than it looks on the map. It's fine when the pavement is dry, not with ice. David leaned over her shoulder. What about here? Cul-de-sac. There's an opening behind it. A walking path, metal posts across both ends. Can the van fit between them? No, even if it could, there's a drainage ditch on the other side. Marcus wrote as they spoke, sketching the streets more clearly than the phone displayed them. Margaret moved through the neighborhood from memory. She knew which corners had wide lawns and which hid retaining walls beneath decorative shrubs. She knew where a homeowner had removed a fence the previous spring, leaving an open strip between 2 properties. She knew which alley looked useful from the road, but narrowed behind the garages until even a pickup would have trouble passing. David asked about every place the van could leave the pavement. Not because he wanted to drive through people's yards. Because roads could become traps. There's the park, Margaret said. The walking trail, Marcus asked. The grass beside it. The ground slopes gently from the street near the playground and opens behind the tennis courts. David studied the map. Fence. Not along the eastern side. Benches, posts. Near the entrance, not across the field. Trees. Spread out enough to get between them. David nodded slowly. That's our first alternate. Margaret dragged the map again. If we reach the elementary school, the main lot gives us room to turn. There's another exit behind the gym. Locked gate, David asked. Usually open during the day. Today isn't usually. There's grass beside it. Ditch. Shallow. Shallow enough for the van. Margaret pictured it. Marcus watched her eyes move as she mentally ran the route. Yes, she said, if we take it at an angle. David looked at Marcus's sketch. Mark the school as the second alternate. Marcus drew a box and wrote beside it. School lot. Rear exit. Grass beside gate. He caught himself making a list and stopped. The page already looked like something David would make. Straight lines. Short notes. Arrows. The safest path was not the shortest one. It curved through the wider streets, avoided the steepest hill, and passed two places where they could cross open ground if abandoned cars blocked the pavement. Margaret knew the neighborhood because she had run through it almost every day. David knew vehicles. Together, they created choices. If this street is blocked, Margaret said, tapping the paper, we turn before the second intersection. There's no room past it. David nodded. We never enter anything we can't back out of. What if something follows us? Marcus asked. We keep moving, David said. What if someone stands in the road? David's eyes settled on him. We judge it when it happens. That was not an answer Marcus liked. It was the only honest one. An engine roared outside. All three of them went silent. The sound approached too quickly. David moved first. He took the axe and crossed into the living room, staying back from the large front window while looking through a narrow opening in the curtain. Marcus and Margaret followed, careful not to expose themselves. A dark sedan shot past the house. Its engine screamed as the driver accelerated across the icy street. The rear tires lost traction near the intersection, throwing the car sideways. The driver overcorrected. The sedan spun. Its front end struck a parked SUV with a crunch of folding metal. The horn began blaring. The car remained angled across the road, blocking most of the intersection. No doors opened. No one emerged. A pale figure appeared at the far end of the street. Then another. They moved toward the sound. David watched for several seconds. They didn't chase it while it was moving, Marcus whispered. No, David said. They noticed the crash. One frozen crossed behind the sedan without touching it. Its head tilted toward the trapped horn, but it did not strike the vehicle. Another moved along the sidewalk, searching for the source of something Marcus could not hear. David let the curtain close. That driver had a clear road, he said. Lost it because he panicked. Margaret looked toward the map. The ice did the rest. David returned to the kitchen. We move slowly enough to control the van, and fast enough that nobody reaches the doors. What if they attack the vehicle? Marcus asked. They might. David did not pretend certainty where none existed. But we haven't seen one choose a moving car over a person standing in the open. We use what we know until it changes. They finished the route. David folded the page and placed it in his shirt pocket, then made Marcus draw a second copy. That one went into Margaret's coat. If we get separated inside the van, we've done something impressive, Marcus said. Margaret looked at him. Your father has lost directions while sitting beside me. Once, David said. 3 times. The road changed. The road had existed since 1978. David picked up the axe. Van. The small moment of humor vanished as they moved. The garage smelled of cold concrete, oil, rubber, and the cardboard boxes David had been promising to organize since spring. The old cargo van sat in the center bay, with its rear doors open. It was not beautiful. The paint had faded unevenly. One side carried a long scratch from a loading dock. The rear bumper showed a shallow dent David insisted had already been there when he bought it. Marcus had grown up hearing the van start before dawn. It had carried tools, lumber, ladders, broken appliances, bags of mulch, and half the furniture Margaret found at yard sales and decided could be useful. Now the interior held their lives. Water cases sat against the forward wall. Blankets and winter clothes were packed into heavy plastic bins. Food filled several crates, the most fragile items wrapped in towels to keep glass from striking glass. Medical supplies occupied a smaller container near the side door, where they could reach it without unloading everything. David climbed inside with the axe still in hand. He set it only far enough away to tighten a strap, keeping the handle against his leg. Marcus joined him. They pushed the heavier containers low and forward, reducing the chance that a sudden turn would send them sliding. Marcus pulled each ratchet strap tight, then tested the bins with both hands. Nothing moved. David checked them again. One container shifted half an inch. He tightened it. Margaret appeared at the rear doors carrying a zipped bathroom bag, a bundle of towels, and a small plastic container filled with things Marcus did not examine. "Where?" she asked. "Near the medical supplies," David said. She placed the bag beside them. "What's in it?" Marcus asked. "Everything we won't want to search for later." She turned and headed back into the house before he could ask anything else. David pushed the bag into a protected space. "Your mother thinks beyond the first 20 minutes," he said. "I heard that," Margaret called from the mudroom. "You were supposed to." Marcus secured the bathroom bag. Margaret continued bringing the things most likely to be forgotten when men packed for the end of the world. Clean towels, soap, extra gloves, food that had already been cooked and would spoil first, thermoses filled with hot water, paper maps from the drawer beneath the telephone. The small sewing kit David had once mocked until she repaired his winter coat with it in a parking lot. She did not waste space. She filled it. David checked the van from front to back. The fuel tank was nearly full. 2 red cans had already been secured near the rear, tightly capped and separated from the food. The tires had good tread, though none had been designed for ice that formed during summer. He opened the hood and inspected everything he could without starting the engine. Battery connections, belts, fluid. Nothing obvious had failed. Marcus checked the cab. Phones and battery packs went into the center console. Flashlights were placed where hands could find them without searching. A first aid pouch fit behind the passenger seat. The keys remained clipped to David's belt. The axe remained in his hand. The pistol remained holstered. By the time they finished, the van looked ready. Not safe. Ready. There was a difference. David closed the hood carefully. "No engine until we're inside," he said. "We don't open the garage door and sit here advertising." Margaret nodded. "What order?" Marcus asked. "You and your mother enter first. Lock the doors. I get in last." "Why you last?" Margaret asked. "Because I have the gun." "And the axe," Marcus said. "And the axe." Margaret looked at him for a moment. David held her gaze. "I'll be right behind you," he said. She nodded. Marcus looked from one to the other. The plan made sense. That did not stop the tight feeling in his chest. They returned inside for the final things. The cold had deepened. It pressed through the walls and windows now, stealing the warmth room by room. The furnace continued running, but the air from the vents no longer felt as warm as it had earlier. The lights flickered once. Margaret looked up. They stayed on. Bathroom, David said. Warm layers, phones on you, not in bags. Once we go into the garage, we don't come back for anything. Marcus went upstairs. His room looked exactly as he had left it that morning, except the light had changed. The gray sky beyond the window made everything appear drained and distant. He pulled on thermal clothing beneath his jeans and hoodie. He added a heavy winter coat, gloves, and boots. His laptop sat open on the desk. For several seconds, he considered taking it. School files, photos, assignments, job applications, pieces of a life that had mattered when he went to bed. He closed the laptop. Then he placed it in his backpack with the charger. He did not know whether electricity, school, or job applications would matter again. He knew leaving it felt too much like agreeing they never would. The house shook faintly. Marcus stopped. A distant impact rolled through the neighborhood. Not close enough to rattle the windows. Large enough that he felt it through the floor. He lifted his backpack and hurried downstairs. The television no longer showed a news broadcast. The screen had frozen on the face of an anchor, mouth half open, one hand touching an earpiece. A buffering symbol turned beneath her. Then the image vanished. No signal. Margaret stood in the living room wearing her winter coat and carrying a heavy metal flashlight. Phones, David asked. All charged enough, she said. Signal is getting worse. Marcus put on his backpack. Another gunshot sounded outside. Far away. Then two more followed, closer together. A vehicle accelerated somewhere behind the houses. Its tires spun against ice, engine whining uselessly before the sound ended with a hard collision. A horn began. It stopped after several seconds. The quiet afterward felt occupied. David looked toward the garage. How long? Margaret asked. 10 minutes. They did not get 10. The first crash came from the house next door. Furniture struck a wall. Something glass shattered. A man shouted, voice muffled by siding and distance. Marcus looked toward the living room wall. Ray, Margaret said. David's jaw tightened. Ray Bowers had lived next door for almost 8 years. He drank too much, shouted too often, and had a talent for making every inconvenience someone else's fault. Marcus had seen him curse at delivery drivers, threaten to call the police on children for riding bicycles too close to his driveway, and spend 20 minutes screaming at his own trash cans after one tipped over in the wind. Other neighbors had stories worse than those. Ray had always behaved differently around David. Not well. Carefully. Years earlier, after Ray threw an empty bottle into the Hale yard during an argument, David had walked next door, placed the bottle on Ray's porch, and spoken to him for less than 2 minutes. Marcus had never heard what his father said. Ray had never thrown anything into their yard again. Another crash came from inside the Bowers house. Ray began yelling. Not words at first. Only anger dragged over fear. A door slammed. Margaret lowered her voice. He's losing it. David listened. Ray shouted at someone inside his house. Then he shouted at the street. The front door opened. Cold air and sound carried his voice clearly between the houses. Where the hell is everybody? David moved into the living room. He kept away from the large front window and approached the smaller side window facing the Bowers property. Margaret followed. Marcus took the steel pry bar from beside the mudroom door and joined them. David opened the curtain by less than an inch. Ray stood in front of his house. He wore jeans, work boots, and a stained winter coat hanging open over a thin shirt. His hair stuck out in uneven clumps. His face looked red from alcohol, cold, or both. A shotgun rested in his hands. He waved it toward the neighboring houses. Come on, Ray screamed. You people going to hide in there all day? No one answered. Ray turned in a slow circle, looking at closed curtains, locked doors and empty windows. I know some of you have guns. He lifted the shotgun above his head. We can take them. Everybody comes out, we clear the street, and we hold the block. David's fingers tightened around the axe. Ray pointed the shotgun toward a house across the street. You hear me? I'm not doing this alone. Margaret whispered, he's going to bring them here. I know, David said. Ray turned toward the Hale house. David. Marcus felt his stomach tighten. Ray stepped into the snow-covered strip between the properties. David Hale, I know you're in there. David did not move. Get your gun and come out here. We need people who know what they're doing. The request sounded almost respectful. Then fear twisted it. Don't you leave me out here while you hide behind your walls. David's expression hardened. Ray had always been selfish. It had usually been small enough to survive. Loud music. Broken bottles. Cruel words thrown at his own family, and the neighbors unlucky enough to catch his attention. Now he had carried that selfishness into the street with a shotgun. He was afraid, so everyone else had to be endangered with him. David thought of Margaret standing inches behind him. Marcus holding the pry bar. The loaded van waiting in the garage. The careful root folded in his pocket. He had disliked Ray Bowers for years. In that moment, he hated him. The bastard had not only doomed himself. He was calling death down on his own family and every occupied house within hearing distance. Ray shouted David's name again. David did not answer. A sound came from behind the Hale house. Vast. Feet struck frozen ground in an uneven, violent rhythm. David raised one hand without looking back. Nobody moved. The running reached the corner. A frozen swept past the side window. It passed less than 3 feet from the glass. Marcus saw its face for only a second. Pale skin pulled too tightly across bone. Clouded eyes fixed toward Ray's voice. A mouth stretched open around blackened teeth. One hand struck the siding as it turned, fingers scraping across the wall with a dry, tearing sound. Then it was gone. Margaret's hand closed around Marcus's sleeve. The frozen had passed directly in front of them. It had not looked toward the window. Ray was louder. Ray was outside. Ray was moving. Ray saw the creature emerge into the open space between the houses. His shotgun snapped down. The frozen shrieked. Ray fired. The blast struck it in the upper chest and threw it backward into the snow. The sound inside the Hale house was enormous. Glass trembled in the frames. Marcus felt the concussion through his ribs. Ray stared at the fallen creature. For half a second, he looked surprised. Then he laughed. A high, breathless sound with no humor in it. You see that? He screamed toward the houses. That's all it takes. The frozen twitched in the snow. Ray stepped closer and fired again. The second blast tore into its head. The creature stopped moving. Come on, Ray shouted. Get out here, we can kill them. A shriek answered from somewhere down the street. Another came from behind the Bowers house. Then the deeper call rolled through the neighborhood. The new variant. Ray's smile disappeared. Shapes began appearing between the houses. One ordinary frozen ran low across a front lawn, arms striking the snow as often as its feet. Another emerged from behind the crashed sedan at the intersection. A third vaulted the hood of a parked car and landed hard enough to dent the metal. Farther away, something larger moved through the street. Its eyes gave off a faint blue light beneath the darkening sky. Its mouth opened too wide. Ray backed toward his porch. No. The word barely carried through the glass. He broke the shotgun open. His hands shook as he tried to reload. A shell slipped from his fingers and landed in the snow. The first frozen reached the edge of his yard. Ray forced another shell into the weapon, snapped it closed, and fired from the hip. The blast struck the creature's shoulder. It spun and fell, but did not remain down. Ray stumbled backward. More shrieks answered the shot. The sounds came from every direction now. From the street. From behind houses. From places the family could not see. Ray looked toward the Hale house. David. David watched him without moving. David opened the door. The ordinary Frozen rose again. Ray fired at it. The gun clicked empty. His face changed. Every trace of false courage vanished. He turned toward his own front door. The larger Frozen reached him first. It came from the side with terrifying speed, blue eyes bright and mouth stretched into a frozen grin. Ray barely turned before it struck. The impact lifted him from the ground. His body flew across the narrow distance between the properties and landed in the Hale front yard with a heavy, rolling crash. The shotgun spun away from him. It struck the walkway, bounced once, and slid beneath a frost-covered shrub. Ray groaned. One arm bent beneath him. He tried to crawl. The larger Frozen remained near the property line, head snapping toward the other approaching shapes. Another creature saw Ray moving in the snow. It ran. Marcus watched it come from the street, shoulders low, feet striking too fast for the ice beneath them. Ray raised his head. The Frozen launched itself. Ray rolled weakly to one side. The creature passed over him. For one impossible instant, its body hung in the air beyond the side window. Then it struck the Hale house. The large front window exploded. Glass, wood, and torn curtains burst into the living room. Margaret screamed. Marcus pulled her backward. David turned with the axe already rising. The Frozen crashed across the floor and struck the coffee table hard enough to split it down the center. Broken glass scattered beneath its pale body. It lay between the family and the front door. Beyond it waited the kitchen, the mudroom, the garage, the van. The creature's fingers dug into the carpet. Its shoulders twisted. Slowly, it pushed itself upright. Its head turned toward David. Then Margaret. Then Marcus. It saw them. Its mouth opened. And it screamed.